Greetings. This is Mu 67A, of which we have some kind of conference in the virtual world focused on Augusto Novaro from Mexico. Angel Blanco, a member of Mu, is here to help with John Chalmers as well, to meet our guests who are, most knowledgeable. And hopefully we're all going to get a window opened wider so we can get more understanding of the accomplishments of Signor Novaro. So, Angel, I'm going to start with you. Welcome.
Thank you all for being here. How are everybody's doing today? I should say, well, tonight in some places. Hey, hello, Anton from Moscow. Thank you very much for being here again. It's such an honor to be co-moderating this forum of Augusto Novaro, one of the most emblematic figures of Mexican music of the 20th century. First of all, I would like to introduce, my co-moderator is Mr. John Chalmers, fantastic actor. And then we have our panelists, Doctora Leticia Varela.
Hello there.
Hello.
One of the, what we call the novarists par excellence in Mexico. She is the biographer of Novaro. I have the book right here. Okay, I recommend it. This is the one and only biography of Augusto Novaro. You can get it online. We have also Professor Jesus Bernal from the Conservatory of Music, and he is a professor of the Novaro system, I understand. And he's been teaching that for many years. I knew him for when I was studying the Sonido 13 of Carrillo. I was also trying to get more information about other composers similar to that. And I came with Augusto Novaro, and I found Mr. Jesus Bernal is an erudite of Novaro. So it's such an honor to have you here, Professor.
Thanks.
Yes, and Santiago still not here. Okay, well, Santiago, whenever he comes, I'll introduce him. He's a fantastic composer, a mathematician, and he is kind of like second grandson of Augusto Novaro. So he will be the family member of Novaro. And who else we have here? Some guests, Manuel Gutierrez from Chihuahua, composer. Andrade and Serrano, novelist as well, very specialized. From Hermosillo, correct? Yes, okay. Yes. Thank you, Professor Andrade, Professor Serrano, for being here and in support of Dr. Leticia Varela. Okay, with no further ado, I'll let my co-moderator, Dr. John Chalmers, continue.
Well, thank you for all being here. I first discovered Novaro's books from Joel Mandelbaum dissertation back in the 60s. And when I was at Berkeley, I had very good library privileges, so I ordered a copy of his major book and Xeroxed a couple of them sort of illegally. Kept one myself. I gave the other one to Urban Wilson, and that copy is now on at the Anaforia site. And then some years later, Mark Rankin found Novaro's first book, the shorter one, and he sent me a Xerox copy. I made a copy for Herb Wilson, and that one is also available now online at the Anaforia site. It's really remarkable material. It all started in the 1920s, at a time when actually a number of people were active. Max Meyer at University of Missouri, although he wasn't a composer as far as I know. Of course, Carrillo, later Harry Parch. But so it must have been a very exciting time, even though these people, as far as I know, were not in contact with each other, except possibly Carrillo and Navarro. But Navarro's work is so fascinating, and it really acts almost like a precursor to some of Parch's work, although I'm sure they didn't know anything about each other. I'd really like to hear some more discussion by people more knowledgeable musically than I am about it. I've just finished trying to read the 2 books in Spanish. My Spanish is not particularly good, but fortunately I know enough Italian and French that I can sort of fill in what I don't recognize immediately. So that's one reason why I'm very pleased that Angel Blanco is actually moderating this thing, because I don't really feel that since I'm not a practicing musician, I'm a theorist. So anyway, I'll turn it back to Angel, and let's get on with it. I've been looking forward to this for weeks.
You'll have to unmute.
Oh, you're on mute, yes.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Santiago just sent me a message that he didn't have the link.
He's right here.
Great. So yes.
Right.
Hola, Santiago. I just got it. So I resend it. Okay. You're mute.
Hello,
Uh,
I just connected.
Okay, so Santiago Chavez Novaro, mathematician, composer, and family member of Augusto Novaro. Such an honor to have you here, Santiago. We're very thrilled to have you here because you are the one and only family member and a musician, fantastic musician, I may add, of the Novaro family. So great. So
Thank you very much.
it's our honor. So I shall proceed if it's possible with letting Dr. Leticia Varela say a piece that she prepared. Touches a little bit of Novaro's biography. As I said, she's the official biographer, and we can discuss from there, okay, different parts of the biography, and I'm sure Santiago Chavez Novaro will help us clarify some family situations, etc., that we have a lot of questions. Okay, so we start with you, Dr. Varela.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very glad and honored to be here. And I apologize because of my language. I don't speak so fluently and not so well, but I'll try to do my best. Okay, so I'm supposed to say something about Novaro's biography. So I'll start saying that he was born in Tacubaya on January 3rd, 1891. And short after that, the family moved to Huaxtepec, where Novaro got his first concepts about the world in an indigenous environment among indigenous folk. So this was very important because he could develop then a very sharp sensory perception in order to know and comprehend reality and a profound respect for nature. And this is something that will have some important place in his works, his research, all his life long. So later, Novaro spent his childhood in Durango and Chihuahua, where his father was working in mining towns, and then back to Tacubaya, where he started having music classes for piano and composition classes. But he studied by himself. He was self-taught in organology and acoustics and music theory. So in 1907, he started to work as a typographer at a print shop. But music was so important for him that he started trying to do something on the piano, looking for sounds, but he had a possibility to feel with his skin the vibration of the harmonics, and listening at the same time to the tempered scale, the sounds of the tempered scale was not pleasing to him. It was very difficult to put all things together. So he got what he called the sound fever. He realized that in 1909. And then he started to study about that, to trying to explain why it was so. Everything sounded out of tune for him because the harmonics were on his skin and the music was on his ears, and it was different. And this sound fever is what guided him to research and to experiment practical work, first on the piano, and then he started building sound boxes and acoustic boxes, and finally plucked instruments. He started building guitars just to listen to the intervals because they were not the same. So he started doing that. And he read all books he could. This led him back to the ancient Greeks, to the Middle Ages wise musicians, and from the Renaissance and Baroque and farther. And after that, well, let me read a quote, what he says about himself in this situation. He said, "I was born a musician, but without any medium of expression. What exists has always appeared so imperfect that I have preferred to dedicate my complete existence to search for the ideal, always trying to produce finer sounds. The task of having to build my own sound instruments has been arduous and costly, but the spiritual compensations are now near without a doubt. Music for me was from my childhood a sickness," end of quote. So this music fever is here, his sickness from his childhood. And this was the motivation for him to continue searching about music. He says, "The farther I advanced into the world of music, the confusion that took over my mind kept growing. I had gone through books that referred the fabulous eras, that explained scientific basis, artistic realms, and all these had done no more than fill me with uncertainty. I assumed that music was an art science whose laws needed to have great strength, and I did not expect to find myself in a sea of discussions out of which few practical results were obtained. Tired of rummaging, I stopped the musical research that I started in 1909. By then, it was 1918. Shortly after formulating my purpose, I started to reflect over musical problems, trying to solve them. For that, I started as if I had to organize music from its base. So that's why he starts to build his own boxes and instruments, plucked instruments, to listen to the harmonics. And for that, he needed the help of a lute builder. So Paulino Morales started his collaboration with Novaro in 1921, constructing tuning boxes and the first guitar designed for 12 not tempered but natural sounds. Well, Novaro will eventually admit the criteria of reason to justify his harmonic theory, but he also will accept the one concerning the human audio-psychological answer to base the possibility of a perfect tuning for the 12-tone scale in the approximate natural system. From 1925 through 29, he published 5 bulletins describing his findings. And the main chapter in the last one was this approximate natural system. It was his an advanced gestation of his harmonic system already. And then at the National Conservatory, where Julián Carrillo had taught his composition class, Professors Jerónimo Vaqueiro Foster and Daniel Castañeda will also teach a course presenting the Novaro system. In 1928, Carlos Chávez became director of the National Conservatory of Music. And after the publication of the Fifth Novaro's Bulletin in 1929, Professor José Antillón started collaborating with him regarding tuning the conservatory pianos. And the following year, Novaro and Antillón presented to Carlos Chávez his findings. Then Novaro proposed the permanent adoption of the perfect tuning for the pianos of the institution. Faculty committee members studied and accepted this proposal in 1930. And this official adoption of the perfect tuning for the conservatory pianos and the coming on board of new collaborators made Novaro very happy and ready to present his system to the scientists and musicians of New York. So Novaro travels to New York in 1930 to present his proposal, and his theory really sparks a strong interest and acceptance from the dean and faculty members of the Juilliard Music School, from Leopold Stokowski and some other musicians and faculty members of the Harvard University. He also holds passionate discussions with Stokowski and with Charles Seeger, Marion Bauer, and Leon Theremin, among others, about the practical possibilities of the fundamental scales and their application to musical temperaments, all musical temperaments. And this array of science and creativity earns him the first one-year scholarship given by the Guggenheim Foundation to a Mexican, which was extended for another year, so he could stay in the United States until 1932. And this time he could publish there the Novaro tuning and to write down the last version of his natural music system, to which he would add later the information about the construction of his instruments, but he had to wait until 1951 to publish it. So, but his activities in New York attracted attention of numerous musicians and scientists. Among these musicians was Emiliana de Zubeldia, a Basque Navarran virtuous pianist and composer of highly refined aesthetic quality, who arrived at the Big Apple at the same time Novaro did, 1930, having previously been in South America, where she performed concert tours. When Zubeldia found out about the booming presence of Novaro in New York, she went to him with great enthusiasm, anticipating the getting to know and being able to use a new harmonic theory. And this was definitive for both of them to build a genuine and long-lasting friendship. And they became a professional duo that was to enrich each of their contribution to the historic development of Western music in the 20th century and beyond. Zubeldia immediately requested Novaro to instruct her about his theory, and the maestro gladly accepted. And before the end of 1930, Zubeldia has harmonized for two pianos a series of folk Basque dances using Novaro's theory, and cooperating with Antonio Otza, a choreographer, plans to dance for dancers of the American New York Basque Center to perform these dances. So Arthur Judson, manager at that time at Columbia Concerts Corporation, enthusiastically received the idea of offering this revelation to the New York public, and decided to put together a complete Basque festival featuring music composed by Zubeldia, as well as dances. The dances arranged for two pianos according to the Novaro theory. The date was set to be Thursday, February 12th of 1931, a couple of months later at town hall. And a few days later, Subeldia and her Basque friends repeat this program at the Columbia University Teachers College, making a great impact. This was to be followed by other public concerts and demonstrations of the music and Novaro's tunings. And a guitar with 15 sounds in the octave is also played on, as well as a lute with 53 sounds. And this, at this point, I think we could hear, or we would like to hear this Novarra, this guitar for 15 sounds in the octave, played by our white angel, Angel Blanco, playing a piece composed by Novaro. Would you do that for us, Angel?
Okay. Oh, right now. Okay.
I think it would be the right point.
The right point. Well, okay. Just for the record, I'm sharing on the chat window so everybody can see. That's the official recording of it, and also the link to the Augusto Novaro biography, if somebody's interested.
Well, and this Novarra was the Novarra that Angel is going to use was built by our lute builder in Hermosillo, Andres Gonzalez, for 15 sounds in the octave.
May I ask everyone to mute, please, for the music? Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just gonna strike a little bit. Loud enough?
Oh,
This is the first time I hear this in guitar. I made a recording of this piece on synthesizer, but
Yes.
it's interesting to hear in synthesizer, but it's also more interesting to hear the original version. Congratulations, Angel.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Professor Jesus. I actually gotta say that I was so inspired by you and that synthesizer recording, and I'm so happy that you know made that recording many years ago. That I said one day, you know, we'll have a Novarra and play it for real. Now, that being said, synthesizer, I really recommend it. I actually gonna search for the link and I'm gonna post it because it's really unique also, because we got to remember that with such a fantastic composer such as Novaro, things work so well also in by electronic means, right? So yeah, that's another possibility, like Morton Feldman will say, another possibility. Yes.
well, let me finish this story.
Yes.
In Mexico, Novaro was start building a new sort of pianos, the Novaro clave, with 1 string per key, and the Novar with 3 strings per key. But this task was so extreme demanding that it took him 20 years. And finally, in the 50s, he decided to build violins and violas and cellos, and they were very much appreciated by the greatest Mexican and foreign musicians visiting Mexico at that time and after his death in November 1960. So, but there's a special feature that Novarro created for every instrument to give these instruments its possible, every instrument, its possible best sound quality. This is a resonator in the shape of a spiral, built according to the fundamental scales. And this could be used in every instrument that we have. So string instruments, of course. His legacy is still waiting to be known and enjoyed all over the world. And I think we are here to achieve that goal. Can we? Would we? You have the answer. Thank you. That's it.
Thanks.
Great, great. Johnny.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions, and that is,
John.
in addition to the 2 pianos that you just mentioned, there's a passage in the text that suggests they tuned the piano to 16-tone equal temperament. Is that true, or did I misread that?
Well, the pianos, Novarro tuned his pianos according to his perfect tuning, but he has 27 ways to tune perfectly a piano.
Yeah.
And he gives the clue in his book.
Yes, I remember reading that section over it, and he gives the beat rates and various things. But also he says his tonometer beats, I think, 7 times in 5 seconds for the octave. So I was never quite sure whether the beat rates he gives on that table are really computed or actually measured. But it was fascinating about the different tunings, because they're basically from the 12th root of 2 to the 12th root of 11.990, I believe. Excuse me, 1.990. So they're slightly shrunk octaves. And apparently they sounded very good, according to the text. I'm sorry, my Spanish is a little bit rugged. But later he talks about keyboards for 14, 15, and 16. And it seems to me that he implies that he tuned a piano to 16-tone equal temperament at one point, but I was never sure about that. One of the questions I wanted to ask when I get some experts here on it.
Well, these pianos were at the beginning of his work.
Yeah.
But he quit doing that. And,
Yeah.
and that's why he developed the natural, the approximate natural system to use a 12-tone scale, but with his perfect tuning.
Yes.
And this is
what was his interest in 15? Why 15 and not 17 or 19?
well, you can put the amount you would like to in every instrument, because you can build your scale with 15, 16, 17, 18, 1,000 sounds in the octave. So and you can build your instrument to play that scale. So this
But there were no resources that were peculiar to 15 that attracted him, or was it?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, Professor. Yeah.
I know the answer of this. In el Sistema Natural de la Música,
Sí.
he explains that in the 12-tone system, temper equal tuning of 12, the 3rd and the 5th don't belong to the same fundamental scale. But in the 15th scale, 15-tone scale, temper scale, the 3rd and the 5th belong to the same, to the 27th fundamental scale. That is
Okay.
the interest
Okay.
in the 15th tone.
Ya lo sé. Okay.
I think we heard that with the final C chord that Angel just played too.
Okay.
Also, one last question. Did he ever play with 31 tone? 31 tone equal temperament? Did he ever explore that?
I think he explored a lot of temperaments, and in Sistema Natural de la Música, he presents a story of practically all the temperaments, explaining the advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, I would just like to say, and he actually analyzes a whole group of them, particularly the ones that Carrillo presented, showing that Carrillo just missed all the good tunings,
Oh,
which is fascinating.
that's in the first book or the second book?
The second book, towards the back.
Oh, okay. The 1950, whatever it is.
1951 book. Yeah,
Yeah, 51.
he analyzes a whole bunch of equal temperaments,
Mm.
and he ends up, he likes 53, and he particularly likes 72. And he has reasonably nice things to say about 19.
Uh-huh.
But most of the other ones divisible, most of the tuning divisible by 6. He's not really very much, he doesn't care for them very much for them because they're inharmonic. I think he liked 36 a little bit.
Was there any interest in the spiral of pure fifths, what they call Pythagorean tuning, in Novaro's work? Okay, that's our answer. Thank you.
Yeah, like I said, I can't think of anything.
I think his spirals were more of the instrumental acoustic design. He didn't want the spirals get into his...
Maybe I can just speak just for a moment about a new thing we learned. That when Novaro was in the United States till 1932, and he was meeting with Charles Seeger, in 1932, Charles Seeger wrote an article that has been missed by most of history, apparently, on Carl Ruggles. In this article of 1932, and just look at the date, right? This is where Novaro's influence on Seeger is greatest.
Fantastic. Yeah.
There's no mention of Charles Ives. So Charles Ives didn't exist yet in the public imagination. And yet, Charles Ives was personal friends with Ruggles. So Ruggles didn't feel it necessary to mention it to Seeger. However, in this article, Ruggles has 21 different notes per octave. And Charles Seeger says the following, and I quote, "We need at least a start toward the development of a tonal system using smaller intervals than the semitone." I suspect that's only really because of Novaro.
Yeah.
And he also says about Europe, Europe is such a slave to its musical past. So that's another reason I suspect this, because with Mexico being not Europe, Seeger was on the trail of finding who is the great first American composer, of which he says there's no one for 15 years, since 1917, since Stravinsky. And that's, of course, not American. So I just thought this is interesting. The 21 notes of Ruggles was not identified by Seeger. He did not understand that that's Pythagorean tuning. And so I wanted to ask that question of Novaro because it's not there either, but it is in the work of Charles Ives. And so we're just now connecting it that way. Who influences who? So thank you so much. I just wanted to add that little historical tidbit.
As a side to that, can someone also answer the question, just out of curiosity? What was happening in Mexico at the time of Novaro's greatest work? What was the backdrop to which, just to give it a little bit of context, culturally and historically?
Well, I can tell you something about that.
Mhm.
Carlos Chavez was the prominent figure. He was the director of the principal orchestra in that moment. He was starting out, and he was very influenced with American music rather than European music. We have Manuel M. Ponce also, and figures that went, Mexico just went out from the revolution. So we started to look for music inside of our roots. So starts the nationalism kind of, and also Julian Carrillo was starting out. So the scenery was very politic in that time. I don't know if that answered. Maybe somebody or panelists can complement, but I can say that.
Quick question, didn't Navarro and Carrillo have a famously adversarial position? And part of that was because of this, their political stances and their social backgrounds, yeah?
Carrillo was a very egocentric person. He all his life didn't admit other figure that himself or his legacy. I am the founder of Microtonalist. Nobody before me made microtones. He had apparently in one of the remember the story about his Preludio a Colón, when someone said, a pianist said to Carrillo, your discoveries are as great as the American discovery of America by Columbus. Oh, and that for that reason he wrote the Preludio a Colón for being as great as himself. It's the adoption. But in the book of the Errores Universal Mistakes is the title of this book by Carrillo. He says that two persons were stealing his ideas. He doesn't speak clearly, but I suspect he says Jerónimo and Samuel. I suspect he's referring to Jerónimo and Daniel. Jerónimo Vaquero Foster and Daniel Castañeda, but that they weren't steal anything. But he didn't admit he was a rival. He feel in Novarro a rival. I think so.
Yeah.
One thing, just to, yes, he's referring to Castañeda and he's referring to Jerónimo. And there's a background why that happened. And I'm not going to go into that because that's more like Carrillo history. But he only refers to Augusto Novarro once that I have found in official, booklets. And he calls Augusto Navarro. Okay? Right like that, Augusto Navarro. And Carrillo said that Augusto Navarro went to exchange information with him, and then Augusto left to find his own path. And then he added once, he's a thief of sounds or something like that. So, but then, Carrillo also embraced evolution, I have here the Genesis book of Carrillo. I recommend this book a lot. And so Genesis. And in here, he talks a lot about the tone scope, the same apparatus that Novarro used. And the tone scope was invented, as you all know, by Carl Seashore, the dean of the University of Iowa, in the 20s, correct, Schneider? Carl Seashore invented the tone scope in the 20s, right?
Yeah, the oscilloscope, yeah.
Yeah, tone scope, yeah. And because he writes down all the units, vibrations of vibration units of the tone scope of the harmonics. And so it's interesting that maybe they were competing on a level. And also we have to take into consideration that Carrillo felt, I will say, sort of betrayed by the official government per se, because they supported more, not exactly Novarro, but more like the vision of the so-called indigenous Renaissance, like reimagining what was the music of the Aztec Empire, you know, and showing it to the world. So that was the goal of Carlos Chavez. And so that I think there was like a lot of bitterness. Now, that being said, the Carrillo family and the Novarro family, they created some great stuff, you know. And here is Santiago, which I would like to give him the word a little bit about all the family trajectory and you know, all those issues. Please, Santiago.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I probably know much more about the family history and internal stuff that also I think influenced Augusto. I will take some time just to give you a family tree for you to know what is my relation, and mostly maybe it can help to put him in some historical perspective also. I will start with my great grandfather, Augusto's father, which was also called Augusto Novaro Carpaneto, who was born in Diano Marina in Liguria, which is between Monaco and Genoa. He married Rosa Novaro, which was his cousin, and also born in Diana Marina. They immigrated to Mexico from the port of Genoa in the late 1880s, and they had 4 children. The first of them, Augusto Novaro, which we are referring today, which was called Uncle Tito in my mother's family. He had 2 children, another Augusto Novaro called Tito Novaro, who was a director and actor in movies, and Blanquita. None of them had offspring. Then a brother of my great uncle Augusto Novaro was Luis Novaro, who was famous because he was the founder and chairman of the Editorial Novaro. My family was always related to printing, and Editorial Novaro became the biggest printing press in Latin America for many years, for what is called the Mexican Miracle, the 50s, the 40s and 50s. And then they have 2 sisters, Rosa Novaro and Bianca Novaro, who they didn't have any children. Luis Novaro had only 1 daughter. But luckily for me, the family didn't end there. Years later, Augusto Novaro Carpaneto, my great-grandfather, married Inés Fiora del Fabro. She was also born from Liguria. She was much younger. She left Italy 20 years after Augusto. And she was migrating with her parents and her brothers, with final destination to Argentina, which is where I am now. It's not clear to me if it's true that Augusto had been left a widower, as it was said in my family. Not even if he really married Inés, my great grandmother. But I don't know that they met on the ship where my great grandmother was migrating with her family. Augusto, my great grandfather, was traveling on business from Italy to Mexico, and my great grandmother became pregnant, and then her family left her on Mexico, and they keep on going to Argentina. And Augusto Novaro, my great grandfather, had 4 children with my great grandmother. The first of them called Octavio Novaro Fiora, also called Augusto, but internally called Octavio, who was the father of my mother, Maria Novaro. She's a screenwriter and director, movie director. He had 4 children, 4 brothers. Another Octavio Novaro, who is a famous mathematician and physicist in Mexico. And Beatriz Novaro, who is also a famous writer and poet. Then it was me. I studied physics and mathematics, and then I studied cultural anthropology and ethnomusicology. So was very late that I got interested in my great uncle's book. I am a programmer, a computer programmer, so to read his book, I began to write a software to really understand what's happening. To me, his book was at first my interest was mathematics, but in some place in the book he describes the scales, and I love that. Like in the 81 page of the 51 edition, he writes some ideas about the many scales that he discovers, and obviously he makes these instruments, some of which I saw only, I never heard them, and that was my relation to that. I wrote this program to create these scales, to visualize it geometrically, and that's my approach to that. And the most gratifying thing to me is to hear it for the first time in many years in a non-electronic context, no, in a natural context. That's very interesting to me. So I thank you, Angel, for playing that and making all this possible. I don't know, I can maybe answer some questions about the family, but my grandfather was the one who organized it and paid for several of the last concerts of Augusto's compositions and instruments.
Santiago, can I jump in?
Yes.
I heard you saw the instrument that your grand uncle built. So do you know if they exist? They are available. Somebody can see them.
Yes.
Because it's one of the most interesting we can study, maybe, because we can saw actually how he built his instruments and how he made the harmonic conceptions. And I don't know if you can, if you know the person who had it, or how can you tell us about that?
Yes. He had 2 children. Tito Novaro was also a musician, but wasn't much interested in his father's work, and a daughter, Rosa, who was the one who kept all the instruments on the house. My Blanquita, I mean Blanquita. I didn't knew her, but my grandfather was very sad about that part of the family history because he thought maybe he could have something to do with that, but he didn't. All the instruments and all the stuff of him that the family had was in hands of Blanquita, who had a fun life, but she sold them all. They were abandoned on her house, and that's why most of his instruments are lost, because nobody really kept them take care of them. My mother always said that the day that she saw my my grandfather cry more was the day that his uncle Tito died, and was because of this. In this, there were many fights between the family, and Augusto and his millionaire brother Luis really didn't end very well, and Luis never paid or support his brother in any way in the last years. So that was part of the problem, that nobody in the family really kept anything of him.
Santiago, if I could, I was doing some research into the wonderful guitars, and ended up corresponding with a couple of family members about 10 years ago. And it was my impression that the guitars themselves, not all the other instruments, but the guitars, were still in Mexico City and held very closely. I think Rosa, would be the name, and was not interested in talking to anybody. And it was made very clear that there were internal stresses in the family, but the guitars
Yes,
still existed 10 years ago, according to my correspondence. Could that be true?
yes, I think also that is true. It's like an internal history of the family, but Blanquita, Augusto's daughter, had a girlfriend who was the one that inherited everything, and that was complicated at the time. So I have a second uncle that has information, but as I am in Argentina and she is in northern Mexico, it's very hard for me to communicate with her, but it's in our plans to talk about that and maybe get some more information about that. It's a history that mostly the women in the family know, because the men they fight a lot in my family between family members. It's a family tradition.
I'm sure Angel has been digging deeply because he's closest to the situation and he would love to get his fingers on those guitars. True?
Yeah. Actually, what like 15 years ago, I was doing, as you all know, lots of research about Julian Carrillo, and I went to visit the archives of Carrillo and spent many months there, actually living in Julian Carrillo's house. That then a friend of mine took me to one of these guys who had like at least 15 different Novarras. I remember them. Uh, last name is Guerrero. He's an evangelical pastor nowadays, but he uses those guitars and music, you know, for his preachings. And so we went into his house, and he said, "Oh, by the way, that's one of the original ones." And he showed it to me. It's like what we see in the book, the one that is in the book, of like the spiral, that one, like that guitar, like that Novara. He's got it, but he's kind of like in his own world, you know. So it was difficult to actually study those guitars. I'll try to, you know, get a hold on him again. It's kind of difficult, but yeah, I'll do my best. Sorry, I just need to jump in with that Schneider comment. Yeah, sure.
Excuse me.
Yes, go ahead,
Well,
Professor
what-
Bernal.
What I can tell you is that the late Silvio Carrizosa was one of the greatest Mexican guitarists. He tried to contact the Novaro family to see the guitars, but said that they didn't want to talk to anybody. He had a Novara, what kind I don't know, but also this is all that I know. But Silvio Carrizosa tried to contact, and the family no access.
So I think right there, Santiago Chavez Novaro, you can, you know, become the president of the new Novaro world, and we will all support you. I'm right behind you, man.
Yes, yes.
I'm sure Professor Bernal and Dr. Varela and Andrade and Serrano, all of us, you know, will be supporting you, Chalmers, Schneider, Johnny, because we need more Novaro, my friend. We need it. And if you convince your own family, you know, I'm pretty sure that will be such a success of, for example, what you can see now with the Carrillo family. We brought the 13th sound to the modern age, and we have like a lot of recordings and festivals and this and this and that. Nowadays, Carrillo is no longer a myth. The 13th sound is right there. I wouldn't say it's thanks to me, no, but I'm saying thanks to all of us, including Professor Schneider, Johnny, all of us. You know, we are working constantly because we don't like having all that stuff hidden, you know. So now is the turn of Novaro, I will say.
May I jump in?
Yeah.
May I? I think that we should find the way to get the resonator, because this resonator makes the difference, and we have informations in the books to build our the Novarras and the violins, and he gives information in his books. So I think if we could have this resonator and the way how to build it, because it has to be built according to the fundamental scales, we need to see it and to understand how it is built, and put this resonator into the instruments and build them according to his writings. I think we have information, enough information to build them. And I think that would give us a very good chance to reproduce his music.
Yeah.
That's my comment.
Oh, can I just say something quickly? Has anybody written any music following Novaro's intonational ideas other than in 12-tone equal temperament?
Absolutely, Zubeldia.
Because I've never really, except
so-
one
so-
piece here.
Exactly,
I've really never heard of
Chalmers.
it. I was hoping that, you know, these things would be available and we could hear them and look at the scores and this sort of thing.
Well, Emiliana de Zubeldia has wrote a lot of music according to Novaro's theory. She wrote for piano and for orchestra and for chorus and for voice and piano and for duets. And he has a lot of music written according to his theory. But this music was presented in Mexico City while she was working with Novaro in the 40s. She worked with him from 1937 through 1947 in Mexico City. And they used to give a concert every weekend at Novaro's house with the new compositions of Emiliana on the pianos of Novaro,
But
the Novar and the Novaro clave. And she presented these instruments with her music.
¿Y
And
cómo se,
Many
cómo,
of those
cómo se
concerts
llama?
fueron-
Emiliana qué?
de Subeldía,
De su,
Subeldía,
In the chat.
de su Beldía. Okay, it's in the chat. Okay, good.
are
I
these,
do have to cut
are
in
these
that
in normal, regular 12-tone tuning or Novaro's variations on 12-tone tuning, or in using the various scales that Novaro studied and worked on? Can you, am I making
Well,
it clear?
Subeldía was my
I'm
music
gonna,
teacher.
sorry, no, it's just,
Yes,
I'm gonna jump in right there because I know what they're gonna
Okay.
say. And actually bring us to the other question that we can all comment, exactly what Chalmers is saying. Professor Santiago, Bernal, and Dr. Varela, the three of them, they teach the system per se. Actually, Santiago made a software of it and is right there on the chat. So maybe we can discuss also with Professor Andrade and Professor Serrano, they're also composition teachers. How do you see, what's the vision of using Novaro system, as Dr. Chalmers said, about, you know, composing new music, you know, with the natural system of music?
Mhm.
Any of you, please.
Well,
Well,
let me introduce me. I am organist. Before in the first years I was studying in the conservatory, I had an interest in searching a new type of music that was near to the people, but also really modern. And there was serialism and the other systems didn't satisfy me because this is not near to the public. Commercial music is near to the public, but not really modern. I thought there must be a third way, and one day I realized that this was microtonalism, and I call this type of music, I don't know if the term exists, but if I use the word transtonal. Novaro music is transtonal because it goes farther than tonality without destroying it. Novaro was really emphatic about not destroying tonality, but to expand it. The natural intervals, the octave, the fourth, the fifth, were the base for him. And then you can add as many of the intervals that you want. So in 1986, well, I heard about Novaro in the acoustic class that in that time was held by Enrique Jiménez Carvajal, a viola player, violist. When Jiménez Carvajal retired, he recommended me to be his successor as acoustic teachers in the conservatory. Since then, in 1987, I am acoustic teacher in the conservatory. I heard Novaro, read the book. I thought this is marvelous, but how can I do this? No instruments. But then I met Raúl Pavón. Raúl Pavón was the founder of the electroacoustic lab in the conservatory. In that years arrived 4 Yamaha synthesizers, the DX2, DX72, and 3 SY77. And that was the way we could start. a microtonal composition workshop as a part of the acoustics class in the conservatory. So since 1990, I have my pupils make microtonal compositions using both or the temporal equal tunings or the Novaro scales, but yeah, and accurately tuned in the Yamaha synthesizers. The Yamaha synthesizers can tune the basic, as I call, the smallest intervals that you can tune in the Yamaha is you can divide the octave in 1024 parts. So you can do a really accurate tuning of the microtonal intervals. So my pupils have been composing and presenting annually these compositions in 1990. Then the pandemic, in the COVID problem, it was suspended. But this year, one pupil he made a new composition. I will want to share to you one of the compositions. Was made by my wife, Ana Laura Cabello. It's interesting. It's using the 15th fundamental scale. This is a work, a sacred work, a religious work, and it was presented in a religious, in a sacred music concert in 1992, a Christmas concert in the parish of Tepepan in Xochimilco. I would like to share to you this. Thanks.
Well, thank you for playing it for us.
If I could
Yeah.
jump in for 1 second and share, we were talking about where, I mean, John Chalmers was saying, where do I hear this music? It just so happened, I'm going to do a quick screen share here. In 2013, Microfest had a very interesting concert. It was called I Tune New York. In New York in 1931, Basque composer pianist Emiliano Zubeldia met Novaro and popularized his revolutionary tuning. We gave a performance of some of Zubeldia's music, as well as music of Ernst Toch, Aaron Copland, and Gershwin, the people that were hanging out in New York who just may have played one of the instruments tuned to the Novaro tuning. So I'm very interested, of course, and Leticia, Dr. Varela, I would really love to continue being in contact with you in order to put on some new concerts. There are quite a few professional piano duos here in Southern California who play microtonally. And I think we must put this all together.
I think so too. I think we can do a lot of things. It's not only the scales, but we need the tuning to play the music that we have in our hands. Emiliana has a lot of music which is at the University of Sonora, and we can use that music, these notes written down, and use the different tunings of Novaro. But we need the instruments to be tuned. Maybe
Yes,
the Yamaha instruments could be useful for this purpose.
yeah. And I think Professor Laura's suggestion and example also suggests that the perfect thing to do is to commission new works and give the old and the new together.
Well, we've been trying here in Hermosillo, the Felizardo Andrade, who's here with us now, and Fernando Serrano, who's also here. We have been trying to compose music according to the Novaro system, but we don't have the instruments tuned like we should like to have.
Yeah.
We need the tuning in the instruments to play this music that we've been trying to compose. And then we have many opportunities to do something. We also can know how to work with the chords, how to use the sounds of every scale. And these are many things that Novaro also explains in his book. So we could do a lot of things still. We can.
Good. Well, let's stay in touch because at least in terms of the 12 note per octave, the perfect tuning, there are several institutions here in Los Angeles that explore and actually have tuners on staff who likes to explore these things. So I think
that's great. We have one
can make
tuner
something
here
happen.
too. We have a tuner here.
Excellent. Let's all get together and demand more.
Well, let's do it. So would we, can we can, and we will.
I will, I would like to give a bit of context because I don't know if many of you know, but Doctora Varela was a pupil of Emiliana de Zubeldia, was a direct pupil of Emiliana de Zubeldia. She learned the Sistema Natural de la Música directly for Emiliana, and Felizardo Andrade and I were students of Doctora Varela, and that's how we get in love of this theory. We've been going in and out, and for as a student, we've been doing workshops of Novaro. We're studying the books. We are doing exercise. We are presenting pieces made with the scales, but as she said, we don't have the instruments with the tuning. So that was very interesting to hear Angel Blanco's piece because it gives another world of the sound, because all we did was doing with a temporary instrument, and of course that make another color of the sounds. So we have some examples, and we have some very short pieces, but we have a lot of work we can share if you want.
That's really fantastic. I have a question for all of you working in Mexico in this area. Is there much research into a connection between the natural scales that Navarro played with and that of the indigenous music of the Aztec, Mayan, Toltec? I know you had mentioned that Carlos Chavez had an interest in bringing sort of the native Mexican sound, but is there any connection with Navarro in that, or are those completely separate universes?
Well, I'm an ethnomusicologist, and I've worked with Yaqui music from Sonora, and I haven't seen any connection till now between these two music worlds. So,
Were there Yaqui tunings?
well,
¿Cuál cosa?
I don't know any Yaqui tunings precisely. I think they use the traditional 12-tone scale. So and of course they don't play exactly the pitch.
Right.
I don't think that's something that they are looking for, but they just miss the pitch. I haven't seen any connection till now.
If I could say something sort of historical, in the 1920s, there was a musical conference, international, I believe in Mexico, and several of Carrillo's students tried to show that you could play, or at least simulate some of the indigenous music using the 96-tone equal temperament. And Carrillo felt he was being betrayed and they sold his work. So the two people, Ben Quiero Foster, another man whose name I don't recall right now, switched over and became passionate defenders of Navarro and proponents of his work. So apparently it was tried at one time, but this is back in the 1920s, and I suppose we could look it up. You probably know about it on hell. It's discussed in I hate to say in Alejandro Madrid's book briefly, and that was really, I think that after that I don't think Carrillo had really very many students. I've always been curious if any of those students just before the rupture had wrote any music.
One of the last students of Carrillo was Oscar Vargas.
Yeah.
Right. And so Oscar Vargas,
Yeah.
he and David Espejo, they were like the last two guys of the Carrillo original students. And so that David Espejo, he just played the harps, and he remained like the Carrillo man of the Carrillo Museum. And Oscar Vargas, he built a giant harp of 909 sounds in the octave. I actually had one of those harps, and there was this recording from the 70s, I think it's called Cosmica and something like that, which is played by Oscar Vargas and David Espejo, and it's on YouTube. I'll find the link. But composition per se, like because there was much more like those guys were improvising a lot. And composition per se, I will say in the 13th sound, well, you have to take into consideration that the composition book of Carrillo is this one, right?
List.
Yeah.
This is the composition book, and also this. Right, the infinite. So pretty much like in order to compose the way of the 13th sound, if you want to take into consideration like by the book, okay, you gotta go through this. And if you want to compose by the book of Novaro, then you have to go, by the of course by the Novaro book. But now that being said, if you incorporate the modern approach to it, such as what Santiago is doing or the other professors doing with their students, I think you can get some really, really, really amazing works.
Yeah.
I,
Guys, a question?
Santiago, yes.
no, just briefly, I use the Novaro techniques to study traditional Mexican music. I studied with Thomas Stamford, and she made thousands of recordings. And what I do is try to get the pitches from the recordings and then use his technique of the both geometry, no, the logarithmic and geometrical and algebraic geometries to try to see when they are using sounds that come from the harmonics and when they are using sounds that come from geometrical scales and the complex ones that are mixed of
Oh.
those. And it simplifies a lot the study of those scales.
Can you show us some of your
but-
lattices, or this is fascinating to me?
Oh,
It's all in the web page. I do it and I add it.
yeah, I posted.
Your
it.
webpage, okay. You posted
Yeah.
one, John, there in the
Yeah,
chat?
Actually,
Yeah, and
what-
you can. I will add more there, but there are a lot, and you can study them, like see how they are constructed
Santiago,
with these
Interesting.
two.
Interesting.
Santiago, can you
Yes.
could you please maybe share your screen and use your software a bit for all of us to understand how to use it, please?
Guys, we're running out of time, actually.
Oh,
No.
okay.
I would
With-
suggest you, I'd love to hear Santiago's actual compositions, especially as, you know, I'm so interested in how families pass on interest in creation. And I want to also just make a point before because we're going to have to move on. But if you can put some links, Santiago, of some of your music, or even is Emiliana, did she ever record? Nobody mentioned that I heard that she recorded. I made a little bunch of points. I'd like to read them real quick because we have to really close this session. When I think of Novaro now, based on today, I'm hearing, and in this order, his concepts, and right away I want to talk about his feeling of the harmonics versus the listening, where this is not a native tradition of Mexico that I know of. So that feeling on his skin is actually quite unique. Next would be the theory and the scales, which is on paper. And for some of us, we actually here can imagine what they sound like. Most people can't, which makes reading the books a challenge. Then you have the instruments, the making of the instruments. Leticia bringing up the
Resonator.
resonator. Yeah, how important that is to make the timbral concept flourish so that the scales and the tuning work best. And then there's composition. And composition here we have very short pieces. I guess there's only so much you have when you have less oeuvre. And that's why you need more disciples, more students, more people who are influenced, let alone family, as in Santiago's case. And then you have the performance. And this is something that I really had to nudge my friend to play today live. Because, you know, it's so easy to put on a recording, but when we heard you play that, now not everybody receives it the same, But for me, it made all the difference. I needed to hear one piece of music composed, heard live, intimately, real time.
Thank
So
you.
that anybody who joined here today later and missed you will have to see the recording, because then it's a belief that, oh, you did do it live. And I think, you know, we could even take that little piece of what you did, which is seemingly flawless.
Thank you.
You know, you can only have another performance with a slightly different interpretation with time or, you know, but that's enough. And here, having a short piece is actually going to benefit because people have no attention span. So you have this little short piece really intimately presented, puts it even on a higher level for some, certainly for me. And then there's the recording. So the recording is actually, interestingly enough, a different place than this live performing. You need both. You need the best quality, the best environment, the best room, the best acoustics, the best equipment, the best software, all of that. So, you know, I think this is also part of what we did today, that you have that. And, you know, I love, Professor, that you had done it electronically. There's a whole history of composers who have to do things crazily in different ways to get closer to what they're really supposed to be. And we did that today.
Yeah.
So I want to thank everyone. I'm going to close the recording now. We can still talk for a moment. 1 moment.